somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, and the dreams that you dream of once in a lullaby. I welcome all of you. This is a day of just great celebration. And how many of you have already had or exchanged a great story about Ferdie? Already. They're wonderful stories, and that's why we're here today. And I welcome all of you, especially Joanna and Allison and Christopher and Sandy, the great class of 66, so many great friends who've come back, current and former faculty, alumni, parents, past parents, and the Board of Trustees. This is a day to celebrate the life of a great man, a great schoolman, and a great friend. When I wrote to the Taft family last month, that Ferdie had died, I began to receive emails and letters and text messages and phone calls in a trickle in those first hours of shock and disbelief, and then in a flood of grief and gratitude. And I cannot tell you how many it was on that first day, 100 at least in those first hours. And they came from all over the world, from dear friends in Hong Kong, alumni in India, advisees fishing in Alaska and working on Wall Street, assist students from all over Europe, leaders of the nation's finest schools, board members from those great organizations that he devoted his life to, old friends from Princeton and his class, faculty members long retired, men on the grounds crew here. We lost a great friend, and I am still to this day, that reach that he had defies explanation. I've never known anyone like him, never known anyone who could touch so many. And we wonder, how do you live without him? My answer is by celebrating him and by honoring him, as we do today. For me, as a teacher, September's the happiest month. It's because we begin the year, but this one was really hard. I spent 30 years here with Ferdie, 12 as headmaster, and every time I gave my opening address to the faculty, I'd find a handwritten letter on my desk congratulating and thanking me. I think a lot of us have received that kind of letter. And I would shut the door, and in silence, I would sit and read the letter over and over again, and I felt blessed. His words were like water to the parched. And you felt this, didn't you? Whether it was a letter or a phone call. All of us are somehow connected in this vast web of love that he had. And he connected us across the globe and across the years. Somehow he shrank the world, brought us together, brought us closer, made us better. And this was his gift. And it was a gift that, when wedded to the love of Taft and for his passion for educating young people and a kind of unfathomable energy, it changed this school, changed each of us. I was in my office this morning, and Linda Sarnioki said, we've got this box of memories, don't we? Right? You all have that. I open mine when I'm fatigued or dispirited, and I find myself repaired and replenished. Ferdie's walking into my office. I'd be at my desk, and he would just stand there, and then he'd say, "Here's what we got." My secretary would come in an hour later, and we would solve the problems of Taft and the world. He's sitting in front of the fire, leaning over the chair. New Year's Eve, I had just introduced him to my girlfriend, Pam. My friend. You've got something pretty good there. Don't screw it up. We're on the top floor of the Grand Hyatt in Hong Kong, jet-lagged, happy after a reception. The waiter greeting him, "Hello, Mr. Ferdie." He and I toasting the friends we have there. But my favorite images of him are at that moment when he greeted a family in admissions in the Harley Roberts room. That was his room, as it should have been. Outsiders may not know that Horace Taft, the founder of the school's greatest friend and supporter, was Harley Fish Roberts, whose name is carved in wood over the door and over the fireplace. And in Horace Taft's memoir, he devotes an entire chapter to the man he hired in 1897 and who stood by his side and was his greatest friend his whole life. Taft wrote, "He was a man of amazing energy. His whole soul was wrapped up into this school. And to me, there's something wonderfully symmetrical and fitting about Ferdie doing his best work in that room in just the way of its namesake. So too did Ferdie give his soul to this school, and so too did he shape the destiny of this place as the face of Taft, as someone who met tens of thousands of visitors. In the Harley Roberts room, a family would meet a man who would change their lives. They would sit on the couch, leafing through the old annuals, nervously wondering what kind of school this was. And then he'd walk in. The floorboards would creak. He would smile, stretch out his hand and say, "Welcome to Taft. My name is Ferdie Wandelt." And they would have just found their answer. And so there's no one who will ever know this school without knowing this great man. He would have a long chapter. It might be entitled "Celebration of a Great Schoolman." I think you'd like that phrase. It's a little old-fashioned. It would be about a father and a husband and a brother and a grandfather, a visionary leader who saw a global school and set out to create it, a tireless ambassador and servant to the educational community, a dear friend to so many, a mentor to thousands of students and faculty. It would be a chapter about love and passion and compassion, about being nice and about doing the right thing, about being the best, about serving others. We'll never forget him. His great lacrosse team, a girls' team in 1979, has given him a bench in his honor that's outside the tent. His great class has seen to it that we'll have a portrait of him. We've established a scholarship in his name. Ferdie would love to see all of you. He wouldn't like to fuss about him. But for a man who every year stood in front of the Board of Trustees and said, "We need to find ways to let kids come to Taft," I think he'd be proud that there's a scholarship carrying his name. I don't think there's a better way you could honor him than to find a way that a deserving student could attend. So here's what I dream about. It's next September. The school year will start brimming with hope and electric with energy, those new students that for so many years he admitted streaming down the hall. He's not here, but I can feel his spirit. I'll send a handwritten note to that student who holds his scholarship. And I'll ask him or her to come by my office. She may be from China or Bulgaria or the Bronx. She's received a letter from Peter Frew telling her about the scholarship, but she doesn't know about this man with that funny first name. I'll ask her to sit down. Let me tell you about this great schoolman whose name you carry. His name was Ferdie Wandelt, and he was a great friend, a great Taftie, and a great schoolman. He was the best.
You guys here? My husband was the public speaker in the family, not me. In fact, it was something I have dreaded all my life, and up until this moment, have managed to avoid it. However, I felt this was something I needed to do, and I would try to do. First, on behalf of my children, their families, and myself, we thank you all for coming today and for all the love and support you have given us over the last few months. A special thank you to Willie and the board for all the help they have given me to make this most difficult time more bearable. And to Chris Latham, Bonnie, Ledley, and the rest of the alumni office for all their help to make today so special, as well as the beautiful service in July. As most of you know, Ferdie went to Taft and graduated in '66 and returned to work here in the fall of '71. As many of you may or may not know, except for his classmates probably, Ferdie was not particularly fond of Taft as a student. He was terribly homesick for his family, and if you were fortunate enough to have known his family, you would understand that. And he missed his girlfriend. Not me, but a red-haired, green-eyed classmate of mine from Princeton High School. In the spring of '71, Ferdie received a call from Lance Odden suggesting that Taft was looking for someone to work for Joe Cunningham in admissions, along with coaching and living in a dorm. He did go on to say that Ferdie did accept this job. He was never to go anywhere near the classroom. However, he did deviate from this briefly after he finished his master's at Wesleyan to teach a small course. Ferdie and I were living in Chapel Hill while he was finishing up his undergraduate work at UNC when he received the call from Lance. After he hung up the phone, we both looked at each other and said, "Why not? Let's just try this for a year." Once Ferdie accepted the job at Taft, he never once looked over his shoulder. He loved his job, and I heard him say to so many people on so many occasions he was doing what he was meant to do with his life. He loved helping people, and he felt such pride when he was able to do so. But anyone who also knew Ferdie well knew that while he loved his work, nothing in the world was more important to him than his family, and we all knew that. My husband was without a doubt one of the nicest people I have ever known, and I'm not just saying that because we were married. In the past few months, I've run across people in town who have taken the time to mention to me how kind and polite Ferdie was to them. The lady at Dunkin' Donuts, where he went for his iced coffee every morning, I told him I thought she actually had a crush on him since she used to draw smiley faces on his cup every day. The people at the restaurant where he read his papers every day, the people at the dry cleaners, the drugstore, the bank, the barbers, everywhere. And every time I heard this, I understood that for Ferdie, there was no excuse for not being nice. Since July 25th, the kids and I have received many letters, cards, emails, and phone calls. They have been read and reread by me and have helped me to see what I already knew, and that was that Ferdie had touched so many lives during the course of his too short life. Family, friends, past and present advisees, parents, colleagues, fellow board members. Reading the things that people have written about Ferdie has made me so proud to have worked alongside him for so many years, but much more importantly, to have been his wife for almost 43 years. I will miss Ferdie every day for the rest of my life, but I will carry his Ferdieisms with me forever, most especially his favorite saying, "Be nice." I love you, Ferdie. God bless.
As many of you know, my dad was a huge Yankee fan. One of his favorite sayings was a quote from Lou Gehrig, "I am the luckiest man on earth." In fact, we are the luckiest people on earth to have known you, Dad. I often think about all of the phrases that Dad had, or Ferdieisms as some called them, one of which was, "It doesn't get any better than this." Others, "It's nice to be important, but more important to be nice." "Here's what we've got." "Walk with me." And one that many of us have been the recipient of is, "You are the best." When Dad said that, he truly meant it. My father meant so much to so many people, as evident from all the emails, phone calls, and the people here today to celebrate his life. He was one of the kindest, most thoughtful, and passionate people I know. In almost 40 years, I don't think I've ever heard Dad say a negative word about anyone. Dad loved life and loved people. He cared deeply about the kids who went to Taft and about the institution and what it stands for. He may have given his life to Taft, but nothing meant more to my dad than us, his family. He felt fortunate for my mom and for each of us. He absolutely adored my mom. Someone once commented that they'd never known another spouse to say "I love you" as many times in a day as Dad said to Mom. Over the past few years, Dad was working on a book called A Life Well Led, which he was very proud of. And one of the chapters in the book was titled My Marriage. The years I've been married, I have not one regret, and wonder if anyone else has been as lucky as I have. I've never looked over my shoulder, as there never was a question to be asked. I want to read a letter that my dad wrote my mom a few years ago. "Dear Joanna, the smile on your face as I kissed you goodbye this morning was special. You will always be my best friend, my girlfriend, and the one I will always count on. I love you with all my heart and soul, and am the luckiest man in the world to have you as my wife. I haven't written a letter like this in many years. My love for you has never been stronger. God bless, Ferdie." Not only was my father the best husband, but he was also the best father anyone could ask for. He was always the first person that I would go to for advice, and I usually never went a day or two without talking to him. Every phone call ended with, "I love you, and God bless." I wanted to share another letter. This one was to my brother and me about 15 years ago. Dear Allison and Christopher, I leave tomorrow for the Far East. I think it is the 12th time I've gone around the world. That is amazing, not because I've done it, but because until 15 years ago, I'd never left the country, nor did I ever expect to. One never knows what is around the next corner. I never expected to work at Taft. I never thought I'd graduate. Stay over 25 years and finally travel to the degree I do. All this is by way of saying be positive about all that is in front of you. No one could ever ask for children better than the two of you. You both have brought a joy and love to me and Mom that you could never imagine. Thank you both for calling last night. It meant a lot. I love you, Dad. One of my father's very best qualities was how positive he always was. With Dad, the glass was always half full, many times full of doers. And no matter what life threw at us, he would always say, it could always be worse and we will figure it out. He had such a calm, confident nature about him that when he said this, we believed him. Boy, I wish he was here right now to tell me everything would be okay. Life will never be the same without you. When my brother, Mom, and I were at Dad's bedside at the hospital, I always remember rubbing his hand and saying, I love you. At this point, Dad was still able to recognize us. He perked up when he saw us and said, you are the best. These were his last words he spoke to us, and never have those words meant more. Dad, we said goodbye too soon, but I will carry with me your zest for life and the guidance you gave me. I will strive to pass these gifts on to my children, Carter, Billy, and Lucy. I am so thankful that my dad has been a part of the lives of my children and had the opportunity to know them and meet our youngest. We will all carry a piece of you now with us, and in turn, I hope that you are happily reunited with Nana and Big, having a big glass of Dewar's. You always told me, Dad, but I'm not so sure I told you enough how proud I was of you. Thank you for all the times you listened, your great advice, for always being my biggest cheerleader and helping me become the confident person I am today, and showing me what true love really is through your relationship with Mom. I miss you so much every day. You are the best. I love you, and God bless.
So I figured I would start with a famous dad quote. Great ideas happen over cocktails. Great decisions are made over coffee. Well, I hope you can bear with me through this because this was written both ways, with a lot of cocktails and a lot of coffee. But Dad, I think I nailed it. Dad, I've lived my life believing everything happens for a reason. And up until Thursday, July 25th at 8 a.m., I never really questioned that. Dad, now I'm not so sure. I mean, at one level, you did so much in your 65 years. You accomplished more than most could in 1,000 lifetimes, and you did it the right way. You laughed, loved, and smiled through your life. You cared about everything that's right and important in life. You cared about family. The way you loved Mom, Allison, me, and your grandkids is hard to put into words, but it shined brightly through with everything you did. I have learned a lot from you, Dad, but what you have taught me about family is something I've always tried to live up to. You always told me, get family right and everything else will fall into place. I remember calling you very stressed out after being fired again. God, that seems to have happened a lot. I seriously think that trying to keep me employed or finding me a job was your second full-time job. Anyway, when I called, all you would say is, how are Courtney and little Chris? Dad, they're good. They're happy. I was saying, okay, Chris, keep those kids happy. We'll figure it out. This classic dad line, we will figure it out, is now instilled in me and is how I live my life. What it really means is nothing ever is that bad, and we will get through it, get through whatever issues there are, and move forward. Well, I'm now going to tell you a dad story that embodied everything he was and is definitely a we will figure it out story. I was a junior in college on a baseball scholarship, and I called my sister and said, Allison, I just got my girlfriend pregnant. I'm dead. I mean, my days in college pretty much consisted of getting up at 11, watching a mix of Jerry Springer and SportsCenter, playing baseball, and heading to the pub. Sorry, Mom. I said, Allison, what am I going to do? Her advice was, go tell Mom and Dad immediately. They're the best and all will be okay. So I'm thinking, okay, Allison, I get that they're the best, but this isn't like the time I was arrested working at hockey camp in Maine, my first and subsequently only summer job, and I had to call Dad. This isn't like the time I tried to legally sign out a bunch of friends at Taft to go play hockey on Saturday night, and I called the dean's office pretending to be Ferdie Wandelt and got caught. By the way, he received that news via fax in Hong Kong. Yes, fax, because anyone who knew Dad knew he had no idea how to turn on a computer, let alone open an email. My mother used to print out every single email and leave it on his desk. Pretty incredible. Anyway, this was different. Me having a baby as a junior in college was big, and even though I knew I had the best parents in the world, this was going to test everything they had. But I said, okay, Allison, I'm going down to Taft. I showed up, walked right past my mom. You always wanted to talk to Dad first, and into Dad's office. He was so excited to see me and says, sit down, let's hang out. I said, no, Dad, let's go outside, I have to talk to you. His face went blank, and he said, okay, and off we went. He knew this was serious. I said, Dad, I need to tell you something. He goes, okay. I said, Erin is pregnant. He takes a minute thinking and says, okay. I follow that up and say, Dad, she's having the baby. Again, he pauses, thinking, processing like he always did, and then he puts his arm around me and says another classic line. Here's what we got. Chris, you are keeping your baseball scholarship, you are graduating from college, and you're going to step up and be a man. He gave me a giant hug, said, we'll figure this out, then paused and goes, oh boy, now we have to tell your mother. But that was classic Dad. He was simply the best. By the way, I truly believe there was no one in the entire world who loved my beautiful daughter Courtney more than my dad. He would tell me daily what a special girl I have, and it was great. Don't worry, Chris, you thought you were a rock star too, buddy. I have many more stories just like this, and they all have the same message. It was all about unconditional love and support. Dad, I'll miss your guidance, love, support, wisdom, and sense of humor every single day for the rest of my life. I will miss my best friend, Dad. Christopher said this to me the other day. He said, Daddy, nothing will ever be the same now that Podgy is gone. Well, Daddy is right. We lost the best person we have known, but you know what, Dad? We will continue to make you proud. I will carry all of what you've taught me every single day and be the best I can be for you. Also know, Dad, that you are not totally off the hook. I will be talking to you daily and asking for your help through many more of my screw-ups and mistakes, so I hope they have good scotch in heaven. You will need it. I love you, Dad. You're the best.
Well, it's certainly going to be tough to follow that. Good afternoon, all. My name's Sandy Wandelt, and blessed to be Ferdie's brother. I want to begin by thanking the school and all of you in the Taft community for being here today to share remembrances of Ferdie and to honor and celebrate his life. I know he and our mom and dad are looking down on us right now with my parents brimming with pride, and Ferdie undoubtedly shaking his head, feeling a bit embarrassed and humbled by all this attention. For myself, ever since the 25th of July, I must say I too have been overwhelmed at times by the incredible outpouring of love and support from people whose lives he impacted both professionally and personally. I've received countless letters and notes from people who were childhood friends that had not seen or spoken to Ferdie in over 40 years, but in some way forever felt a connection to him. It's truly remarkable. Growing up in the Wandelt family, humility and humor were traits that my father ensured that we understand and embrace from an early age. And being 2 years older than me, he naturally took me under his wing and was never shy about giving me some of the good Ferdie brotherly advice. And while he grew to be known for his impeccable guidance and wisdom, candidly, there were a couple of occasions when we were young that his wisdom may not have been quite up to his standards. And I know he wouldn't mind if I opened up the Wandelt family vault and shared one such occasion. I believe I was 6 and Ferdie was probably 8. And we were at a very fancy, large dinner hosted by our grandparents at a place called the Memoriam Cricket Club outside of Philadelphia. We were sitting at a very long table of adults, and Ferdie was sitting across from me. And at some point, the waiters came around and placed finger bowls at all of our tables. And I remember distinctly, I looked at it, and I looked over at Ferdie, And I said, what is this? What are we supposed to do with this? And he looked down, and he looked back at me, and he said, it's lemonade, Sandy. We're supposed to drink it. And so we did. Much to the chagrin of my mother, but those of you who know my father, he was down a couple seats, and he was laughing hysterically, and he said, you know what, if the boys are going to do it, I'll do it too. So down the hatch it went. And suffice it to say, it was probably quite a bit of a time before we ventured back into the hallowed halls of the Memoriam Cricket Club. You know, I always knew that Ferdie would be successful over the course of his lifetime. Success, by the way, that he measured not in dollars, but by two commitments. The commitment he made to his family to be the best husband, grandfather, son, and brother that he could be. And certainly the commitment that he made to Taft 40 years ago, that he would always have the school's best interests at heart in every decision he made and every action that he took. Perhaps, though, it was the humility with which Ferd went about his life that I admire the most. He rarely talked about his accomplishments or dwelled on a recent success. For him, it was just him doing his job. I realize now that he wasn't a great admissions director and envoy for Taft. He was, in fact, an extraordinary one. Whether he knew it or not, or agrees with it or not, he has indeed left a legacy here. Taft is a better place for having Ferdie a part of it. He has left an indelible mark on the school and all those who knew him. But be very clear that all of you have left an indelible mark on my brother. If Ferdie was here today, I have no doubt that it would be he who is thanking you for giving him the opportunity to come into the admissions office at such a young age, when other schools probably would not have taken the risk. Thanking you for allowing him to make mistakes along the way. Thanking you for allowing him to think outside the box. Thanking you for giving him the freedom to speak his mind. And thanking you for trusting him to make decisions and follow his instincts. Simply put, Ferdie would stand here and thank you all for allowing him to be him. He's one of a kind, and his spirit will always live in the hearts of those who knew him or knew of him. And towards that end, he and I found great strength in a passage that we read when my mom and dad passed away. I read this actually back in July at Ferd's service, and I know we would find it fitting to share with all of you today. Its author is an unknown American Indian. Hold on. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond's glint on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn's rain. When you awaken in the morning's rush, I am the swift lifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft star which shines at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Stanley, president of ASSIST, and I'm honored to join you in remembering our friend Ferdie, one of those few remarkable people who always made the time to touch our lives in thoughtful, indelible, and memorable ways. Ferdie's relationship with ASSIST began in the early 80s when he introduced headmaster Lance Odden to ASSIST and enrolled Taft in our program. Ferdie had a clear vision about creating a school with a diverse worldwide enrollment, even though he himself had never been outside the U.S. That was remedied quickly when he had joined the ASSIST Board of Directors, an appointment that was to endure for 30 years. Ferdie was a force of nature on our board. pushing us to pursue innovative and meaningful initiatives. He also shared with us new important ventures he was pursuing himself. We returned to China 9 years ago, long before secondary schools discovered this emerging market, and we brought outstanding students to Taft, Loomis, and on the ASSIST program. Ferdie assembled a delegation including Lady Ivy Wu, Alex and Irene Chu, Yiming Yang, also a director of ASSIST, and Tom Southworth of Loomis Chaffee. At the same time, Ferdie also led us to Vietnam. He helped us return to Hungary. He interviewed in Germany every year, interviewing more than 200 students in a single week. He represented ASSIST in Bulgaria, Australia, Spain, and Moldova. Now, Ferdie couldn't find Moldova on a map, mind you. But when we asked him to go, he smiled that Ferdie smile, and he got on the plane. My own friendship with Ferdie began 13 years ago when I first joined ASSIST, and he invited me down for a visit in Watertown. As he had for so many, he wanted to provide wise counsel and very personal support. So when I entered his office, one of the first things I noticed, right on the left-hand side of his desk, was a very up-to-date laptop computer with a picture of Courtney on the desktop. And I thought, oh, fantastic, this guy gets technology. Yeah, thanks. Now you tell me, but 13 years ago, I didn't know I was looking at a $2,000 digital picture frame, which was all it amounted to be. That was August. In January, we were in Cologne, Germany, staying at the Dome Hotel, Ferdie's favorite, in rooms about 8 feet apart. Remembering the great technocrat that he was, when I was reviewing my email, I saw something I thought he would find of interest. I forwarded it to him, and about 45 minutes later, I had a thoughtful reply. That afternoon, I was in Ferdie's office in the hotel, which some of the other guests mistook for the bar, and Ferdie told me, I thanked him for his email, and he said, let me tell you what really happened. The email went 3,873 miles to Watertown, Connecticut, where Joanna did strategic triage on the email. And my email was allowed to go to Ferdie, which meant Joanna printing it out and faxing it back to the Dome Hotel in Germany. At this point, the concierge picks his favorite bellhop to bring the message up to Mr. Wandelt because he knows the bellhop is going to get a tip roughly equivalent to a week's wages in Germany. Ferdie studies the email very carefully. He takes out one of his $350 Mont Blanc pens. He confided to me he only brought the cheap ones on trips just in case, he should lose one. And then he would scrawl in Sanskrit a reply to this email. A call down to the concierge, and this ensuing mayhem, 4 guys in their 40s, the bellhop crew, are all running up the grand stairway of the Dome Hotel, wanting the over-tipping from Ferdie that would ensue from retrieving this message. Message goes back down. It's faxed back to Watertown. And this is the amazing part of this. Joanna is able to read Ferdie's handwriting. She then composes a reply email and sends it back to me at the Dome Hotel. 15,492 miles of travel, 8 feet of progress, priceless. Thus was born a new technology, the e-fax, which only Ferdie could have invented. I've always enjoyed this anecdote for its humor, but it's also an insight into several dimensions of Ferdie. First, Ferdie always did things his way, and his way was enormously successful. However, he would find ways to accommodate the changing world around him, and the e-fax is such an example. The e-fax also reminds me of Ferdie's amazing marriage, partnership, and professional tag team with Joanna. The startling choreography of the way they worked together was much like pairs figure skating at the Olympics, where each knew the other's strengths and moves, where success is only achieved by working seamlessly together, where one never knew where the contributions of one ended and the other started. They were an artful, graceful, and thoroughly successful team, completely committed to the Taft community. This is the basis of what I'll remember about Ferdie. Certainly his professional accomplishments at Taft are legendary, and his voluntary leadership of SSATB and of ASSIST were transformative. But what I'll remember most about the man is the interest he took in others. All of his advisees, the young college grads looking for first jobs, the many who wanted to start a career in education, colleagues whose lives were in disarray, the parents whose son or daughter just had a bad day at Taft. And I certainly remember 6 years ago when I was undergoing a tough regimen of chemotherapy. Ferdie would call every 3 or 4 days. He'd check in with me, with my colleagues if I wasn't there, ask about me, ask about them, ask if he could help. Did we need help visiting a school? Do we need help getting a mailing out? Sure, he'd come up and fold letters with us, stuff envelopes, anything to help out. He lived his life by placing himself in service to others. Occasionally, I still pick up the phone to call him, forgetting that I can't, and I miss him. But it's at those moments that I remember what he taught me, and I'd hope he'd be proud because some of his lessons stuck. Because he saw things in me that I had yet to see in myself, because he helped make me a better colleague, a better person, a better friend. Thank you, Ferdie. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Southworth, and I work in the development office at Loomis Chaffee now. But for 25 years before that, I was in the admission world, and that's when I got to know Ferdie well. And I know Ferdie's up there having a great chuckle right now because he's got a lone Loomis pelican in a whole tent full of rhinos. If I wasn't intimidated enough, that did it. It was well before the sun would rise on this particular Saturday morning. Andrew Bogardus, Bob Stanley, and I were with Ferdie in Ho Chi Minh City's Tan Son Nhut International Airport. We had all been traveling on the Pacific Rim for about 3 weeks, and now, finally, it was time to begin the long trip home. Now, there's not much good about these Dark 30 flights, but one of them, good things, is that there tend to be very few people in the airport, and that translates into mercifully short lines at passport control. Such was the case on this morning as Ferdie and I formed a line of 2 at one of the stations. He was first and he sailed through. My turn. All seemed to be going well. A check of my boarding passes, a check of my passport, a scan of the passport. They both get stamped and the agent hands them back. Almost hands them back. Then he does the arm U-turn. Opens my passport back up and begins to look at it quizzically. Then he gets up, signaling me to stay right where I was, and he and my passport walk about 25 feet away to a desk where his superior was sitting. Now they both look quizzically at my passport. Then together they get up and disappear into a room bordering the immigration hall. My heart rate is a little bit higher now. Matter of fact, it was a lot higher. I looked up at Ferdie, who was standing just about 10 feet away, and he was quick to read the worry on my face. Thomas, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I've got your back. Ferds, I say, only half jokingly, what if my next stop is jail? First thing he did was give me one of those great Ferdie looks. I'm sure you've all seen it, the head over the top of the glasses. And he replies, then the cell has to be big enough for both of us. It's just that simple. The good news is that in a matter of a few minutes, the officer returned and my passport and boarding passes were handed back. He'd made some simple clerical error. All was good. But here's the real moral of this story, though we can laugh about it now. At that moment, Ferdie wasn't joking. He did have my back, and had circumstances required it, there's not a doubt in my head he would have been next to me in that jail cell. But I also tell you this story for another reason. I, Loomis Chaffee, was in Vietnam only, and I underscore only, because of Ferdie's extraordinary generosity. In the late 1990s, Ferdie, who had already become something of a legend in the boarding school world, well, actually not something of a legend, for his extraordinary work on the Pacific Rim for Taft, Ferdie then decided that Vietnam was worthy of his attention, and he ended up being right. Seems he always ended up being right. Using his endless Taft connections and very methodical style, he began to make inquiries, ultimately making his first trip to Vietnam, where he would establish connections that would, in fact, yield outstanding young Vietnamese students for Taft. And once he had his system humming along, he did what he always did. He turned to colleagues and other schools to share the program, to simply give it away. Loomis, Chaffee, Berkshire, and the Assist program were some of the beneficiaries of his generosity. In a time of increasing competition amongst boarding schools for great kids, why would any director of admission share such a wonderfully powerful resource with his competitors? For Ferdie, the answer was simple. So simple, in fact, he didn't really even understand the question. As he said so often to me, Southworth, it's not about me, it's not about you, it's not about Taft, it's not about Loomis, it's about kids and the opportunities we can provide for them. It's just that simple. For Ferdie, everything started and ended with the kids. If he came up with a great idea that would benefit kids, such as this program in Vietnam, then the first thing he did after turning it into a successful program was to give it away. Because of the kids, it was just that simple. Anytime I came anywhere close to questioning Ferdie about his willingness to give away his best ideas, I would always get a classic Ferdieism in response. Southworth, you're an idiot. You're an idiot was a phrase Ferdie used often. Those of us who traveled with him used to quietly compete with one another to see which of us could be the first idiot of the day. I usually won, mostly never clearing breakfast, as a matter of fact. But what we knew was that it was a phrase of affection, often quickly followed by another classic Ferdieism, you're the best. All of us here, each and every one of us, know it was Ferdie who was the best. All of us know that of all the people we've known in our lives, there are just a few we'd call the rare ones, the distinctive ones, the special ones, the ones that are the best. Ferdie was truly the best. It's just that simple. Near the end of the movie Camelot, which is based upon T.H. White's wonderful novel, The Once and Future King, there is a scene that has always reminded me of Ferdie. It's about the specialness of a very few people. King Arthur is seen talking very animatedly to a young boy, and it's clear that Arthur is quite taken with this lad. After Arthur dispatches the boy, ancient King Pellinore, who's been standing by watching, asks Arthur, "Who was that?" Arthur's reply, "One of what we all are, less than a drop in the great blue motion of the sunlit sea." But the point Arthur really wants to make comes next, when he says, "But it seems, Pelly, some of the drops sparkle. Some of them do sparkle." All of us, including Ferdie, are less than a drop in the great blue motion of the sunlit sea. But Ferdie sparkled. Oh, how he did sparkle. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Yiming Yang. I'm a class of 87 at Taft and also a friend of the Wandelt family. A dear friend of mine asked me recently what a Chinese memorial service would be like. That's where I grew up. I said it will be very different because you can't laugh. I'm glad that I'm not at a Chinese memorial service. But to be honest, When Ferdie left 2 months ago, I was overwhelmed with grief. My heart was gripped by a profound sense of loss that I've never experienced before. I tried to understand why. Not so much why it happened, but why I felt the way I did. Now, this might sound strange to some of you, because after all, Ferdie was one of my closest friends. Ever since he picked me up at the Danbury bus stop in 1986, my first experience in the States as an exchange student from China, I've been coming to Taft, to his house, for most of major holidays for over 20 years, racking 2 rental cars along the way, and losing all my luggages and my Christmas presents one year on a Greyhound bus. We later traveled together on multiple occasions for student recruitment for Taft, and we served for almost 10 years on the board of ASSIST, the exchange program that brought me here. But still, Ferdie's passing stirs such strong emotions in me that I struggled to understand what it all meant. We all know that he was a remarkable human being. He had been such a great husband, father, grandfather, friend, colleague, pioneer, and leader. But yet, somehow he seemed so much more than all of these things to so many of us. We all felt touched by him in some special way. It suddenly dawned on me the other day that his secret of having such an enormous impact on so many of our lives were hidden in plain sight. We felt touched because it was his intention and desire to touch us. He loved it, and he devoted his entire life doing it. And boy, he touched indeed. He touched when he wrote passionate letters to Joanna after 40 years of marriage. He touched when he kissed on his children's foreheads and told them how much he loved them, even long after they have their own children. He touched when he left flowers at my mother's apartment in Beijing when he couldn't make it out to go see her. He touched when he sent you his trademark handwritten note the night he had dinner with you at whatever city you are around the world. And he touched when he called and tell you how proud he was of your wonderful child who just graduated from Taft. That was what he did. That was what Ferdie did. He rarely talked about big ideas. He always talked about people. In his mind, if you couldn't touch the people around you, your spouse, your children, your colleagues, and your student, how realistic and sincere is it for you to touch anyone with those loftier goals? The last time I heard Ferdie's voice was on July 11th of this year, 2 weeks before he died. He called and left a message on my cell phone. It started something like this. Dear doctor, I'll try to make this brief. He went on for 5 minutes to explain that he had just bumped into a faculty member at Taft who had a recent surgery and was going through a tough recovery. He thought it would be a good idea for me to give him a call, as I would understand the situation and might be able to lift his spirit up. I obliged, as I have always done after receiving about a dozen of these requests from Ferdie over the years. Throughout this time, I have always thought that I was doing Ferdie a favor. I was doing whoever I called or visited a favor. It wasn't until recently that I came to realize it was the other way around. Ferdie was doing me a favor. He was showing me the key to a richly fulfilling life like the one that he has led. Today, I want to tell you, Ferd, that I'm sorry that I didn't get a chance to call back that day, but I did receive your message, and I got it. I will try to remember to do a little bit of what you asked me to touch someone every day for the rest of my life. Thank you for being part of ours. Thank you.
I was lucky enough to work side by side with Ferdie for 28 years. And far more powerful than our words up here is your presence coming from all over the United States, some from Alaska, some from Florida, Washington, Colorado, Texas, as well as from all over the world, from Hong Kong today, from Japan, from Germany, and from China. This seems fitting as we celebrate a man who spent his whole life crisscrossing the globe to bring the brightest and best to Taft. Last week, at the annual meeting of the Secondary School Admissions Test Board, Bob Stanley, Tom Southworth, and I spoke to 700 independent school educators at a ceremony recognizing Ferdie's extraordinary service to the industry. Ferdie served for years on the SSAT board and was the 1994 Bretnall Award winner, the SSATB's highest honor, given each year to a leader and educator who has made significant contributions to the field of admission. As a board member of both SSATB and TABS, the Association of Boarding Schools, Ferdie was known for his ability to cut through petty rivalries and see what was good for all schools, not just those fortunate to be among the 10 schools. He's known as one of the titans of the admissions world. It's fair to say that Ferdie was not tech savvy. Thanks to his wonderful wife, Joanna, who has been our admissions office manager since the days of IBM Selectric typewriters, Ferdie never used to learn a computer. Bob Stanley mentioned earlier the infamous eFax. And if that story doesn't highlight his unique manner of communicating, here's another. On a beautiful day last spring, Ferdie's door across from mine on Main Hall was open. My door was open. And the door between Joanna's desk and my desk was open. Lovely day, air blowing around. I look across the hall and I see Ferdie pick up the phone. By the way, since we're 15 feet across from each other, I can hear what he's saying as well. I hear JoJo's phone ring. And I hear Ferdie say, "JoJo, get me Peter." Now, JoJo, who is typically juggling about 20 different jobs simultaneously, exclaims, "Ferdie!" And I start laughing. And before Joe has transferred the call to me, I tell Ferdie across the hall from desk to desk, "You know, Ferd, we could just talk without using the phone."
Pathetic, he says. And I'm still not sure which one of us he was talking about. But despite Ferdie's circuitous communication methods, he had the best instincts in the business about kids, about schools, and about what was right. He dedicated 42 years of his life to Taft and was director of admissions from 1972 until he handed me the baton in 2006. And he was a wonderful boss and mentor to me. 42 years of shepherding thousands of kids and parents, and Ferdie was still interviewing this summer. Interviewing was always his favorite part of the job. He simply loved talking to kids. Most of you here under this tent, I suspect, were interviewed by Ferdie. He had the gift of connecting very quickly and deeply with teenagers, and then teaching amazed parents what their kids were all about. Despite a demanding job, he always made time for his advisees. And I look out on this sea of faces and I see hundreds of Ferdie's advisees here today. You all know that he had an incredible ability to right the ship when you were struggling academically or when you fell afoul of our discipline system. Watching several generations pass through Taft and welcoming his lacrosse players and advisees back to campus each alumni day, Ferdie had the wisdom to know that those who struggled most during their teenage years frequently became the best, most successful adults, and frequently our board members. The loyalty and love he engendered made him the perfect choice to be Taft's assistant head for alumni affairs. Ferdie also particularly enjoyed mentoring new faculty, patiently dispensing pearls of wisdom from behind his desk on Main Hall or from his living room. He and JoJo, as most of you know, lived on the corner of campus in that beautiful house. And if the light on his lamppost were on at night, countless teachers and coaches would flock to him for career advice, camaraderie, and good cheer. The glass was always half full with Ferdie, as Allison said, often with doers, and he would send his friends away with the inevitable, "You're the best." If he were here today, you know what Ferdie would say. He would tell each of you, "You're the best." If we hold fast to his mantra of putting children, be they students, advisees, sons, daughters, or grandchildren, first in our list of priorities, we will be the best.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Sylvester, and I was, according to Ferdie, his first mistake. I came down to Taft in the winter of '72, pursuing a year of postgraduate work here at Taft, and that's a long story. Today is about Ferdie, but he reminded me really right up until this summer that I was his first mistake. I said, "But, Ferd, think about it. We're not perfect, right?" And he said, "Yeah, you're certainly not." Everybody up here has spoken about Ferd's ability to write. Amazing to me. I mean, the dinner wasn't over yet, and the note was in the mailbox at your house. It was just, and his children do the same thing, which is brilliant. So I thought I'd take a crack at writing a letter. Keep in mind I'm a PG, okay? I know, Pete, a 2-year PG. I don't want to get into that. Mr. Nichols is not here, is he? Dear Ferdie, well done, young man. You got it right. And yes, you are the best. This is my turn to write, Ferd. Please know you made a difference. And to quote you again, that's good. So many of us thank you. We thank you for being Ferdie. Whenever you spoke to one of us, one-on-one, we were all that mattered in that conversation. You always made us feel important. You listened, you heard, and then you questioned, but you never judged. Ferdie, you reminded us that we're all human, not perfect, but all of us were good. That, my friend, is a gift I certainly will never forget. And I remember a conversation years back when you said to me, Sylvester, you must always remember there is no such thing as a bad kid. All kids are good. Now, sometimes good kids may do bad things, but that's okay. Do you get it? I might have been talking to you about my own children, but I can't remember. What a beautiful, beautiful philosophy on young people. Ferdie, your faith in people, regardless of age, gender, or background, will be sorely missed but never forgotten. I thank you for that. You often reminded me that life brings much joy, some bitter challenges, and at times disappointment. You never let the challenges or disappointments defer you from expecting good to prevail. How I admired that. To me, what was even more compelling than your positive view on life was how you lived. Quite simply, you knew what was important, and that's how you lived. Family first, and then Taft. Clarity, simplicity, and real. In the case of family first, it always started with Joe, your loving bride of 43 years. Your special relationship with Joe was clear to most. More importantly, clear to you both. And of course, abundantly clear to Allison and Benji, Chris and Aaron, your brother Sandy, and your 5 beautiful grandchildren. By the way, Ferd, the baby is getting bigger, and rest assured, the legacy of her grandfather will be shared with her over the years to come. After all, that's what families do. Ferd, although you left a bit early, I struggled with this one. I said, from my point of view. Not from my point of view that he left early. It's to the next part of the sentence. Ferd, although you left us a bit early, from my point of view, there was nothing left unsaid. Your family was most important in your life, and your family knew that. That, my friend, is good. You got it right. Oftentimes we chatted on the phone, and when I asked you how was the family, the answer was always the same. Sylvester, it gets no better. After family came your love for Taft, and what a difference you made to this special place. How about the thousands of young people who came to Watertown for their initial meeting with Mr. Wandelt, and eventually dropping the Mr. for Ferdie? You were always available for young people, whether it be a Ferdie chat in your office as you kept others waiting for hours, a cheer from the sideline, or a feed with you and Joe in HDT, or in your home on campus. Wow, how many young people loved you. In a world where most people are more concerned with the task at hand or getting ahead for personal gain, you never forgot what was most important. Young people, their development, their fears, their accomplishments. You understood the importance of mentoring young people. Not only did you mentor, you made young people feel important because, in your own words, they were. Years ago, I came up to your apartment when I was approaching the end of my first PG year. After not doing so well, obviously. And my question for you is quite simple. Ferd, do you think I can come back for another PG year, quote unquote? After dropping your glass on the floor and a long stare at Joanna, you said, Sylvester, did I hear you right? Well, Ferd, thanks for convincing Lance to let me come back again. It gave us another year together. And I will never forget your words of wisdom after we worked out my return. Sylvester, this time we need to get it right. Ferd, you made Taft a better place, and yes, Taft made you better. On behalf of the thousands of young people who have walked these halls, and thousands of parents who have entrusted this great school with their children, I want to say thank you. Thanks for being Ferdie. And thank you for being such an important part of Taft and such an important part of my life. Oh, and Ferd, I'm attaching my favorite poem for you to read. There is no person I know that deserves this poem more than you. Take care, my friend. The name of this poem is What Will Matter. It is literally my favorite poem, and I do think it's got Ferdie all over it. So let's give it a go. Ready or not, someday it will all come to an end. There'll be no more sunrises, no minutes, hours, or days. All things you collected, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. Your wealth, fame, temporal power will shrivel to irrelevance. It will not matter what you owed or what you were owed. Your grudges, resentments, frustrations, and jealousies will finally disappear. So too, your hopes, ambitions, plan to-do list will expire. The wins and losses that once seemed so important will fade away. It won't matter where you came from or what side of the tracks you lived on at the end. It won't matter whether you were beautiful or brilliant. Even your gender and skin color will be irrelevant. So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is not what you learned, but what you taught. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many will feel a lasting loss when you're gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories that live in those who loved you. What will matter is how long you will be remembered, by whom and for what. Living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It's not a matter of circumstance, but of choice. Choice to live a life that matters. Thanks, Fred.
I have to make an observation before I make my comments, and that is that Ferdie used to say, or I would stop Ferdie after a faculty meeting and say, Ferdie, how did that kid get in? And Ferdie would always say to me, well, you know, my friend, sometimes one gets by the goalie. Ferdie showed up at Taft, where I had been for 3 years as a young teacher. He starred on championship hockey teams and lacrosse teams that I was involved in coaching. He was a monitor, probably the most distinguished person in his class. He was certainly the counselor to most. And somebody made reference to the fact that he didn't particularly love Taft. In fact, he was the counselor who helped people run away. That used to happen in an all-boys school. It doesn't have it anymore. So he began honing his skills way back then. He was the corridor monitor on the 4th floor of HDT, where Patsy and I lived. He was a great corridor monitor. And he spent an enormous amount of time in our apartment because he was often homesick. He talked all the time to his girlfriend in Princeton, who we know was not Joanna at that time. And he was just a fixture. In fact, he was such a fixture that I often wondered whether or not he didn't have a crush on Patsy, who was then 21 years old and quite attractive. Not that she still is, that's right. I appreciate Thank you, Joanna, for pointing that out. In any case, we were an all-boys school, and you had to forgive him for that. But then this happened. One day I saw Ferdie in the hall, and he looked really down and out and sad. So I said, Ferd, what's the matter? And he said, I'm really having a tough time with my roommate, Doug. It's Doug Johnson, who's here. And I fell right into the trap, and I said, I can't help you with that. Doug's a really good guy. And Ferd said, well, I respectfully disagree, sir. I said, oh? He said, yeah. He said, we could switch roommates. Like all of you, Patsy and I, our family, are extraordinarily indebted to Ferdie for all the wisdom he passed on to our kids. He was Jake's advisor for 4 years. He was Laurie's coach for a number of years. Patsy roamed the sidelines with Ferdie. They were really good examples of athletic prowess as they smoked cigarettes, as they worried about how they were doing. Ferdie and I were great friends. We were great friends as family. We did so many different things. I always assumed that when my time came, he would speak at my service, but the Lord intervenes in weird ways. The Sunday after Ferdie's funeral,